Well, hi. Thank you for checking in here on the BDR lunch gathering videos. We're glad you're here. We want to let you know that we have quite a few of these videos. In fact, if you go to the BDR site and check out our page, you'll find that here under news and lunch gathering, you'll find not only the fact that these educational web seminars are free, there is no cost whatsoever, but you'll find out what's coming up and a complete listing of all the different ones we've had in the recent past and over the past 2 years and a half. All these are good sources of information that I think you'll enjoy. So we invite you to check in, visit with us, and let us know how you appreciate them. There is a little button in the bottom here. It says subscribe. If you click on that to the little bell, you'll get a weekly reminder when new posts are made. And we, again, thank you for being part of our family. We can see hurricanes coming, but can you predict the flooding? What have we seen in places like Houston as a good example, or in New Orleans during Katrina? I still don't think the folks in Asheville expected what Helene dumped on them because it looks like somebody took a razor and just wiped this town and almost nothing remains standing. So here's the question that I have. Radio stations are there, and it even showed up in one of the FCC public notices here, which I think was part of the DIRS, licensed in the interest of for the public interest, convenience, and necessity, PICON, we used to call it. So if you are in a place where flood happens, what's the thing to do? How can you prepare or how can you recover? I know that in Katrina time, again, it was Clear Channel then. They put together a couple of trucks with a dish and a pair of transmitters and cable and such, and they could drive to any location where a station was off the air and go back on the air with an N+1 transmitter and take the feed from the satellite. I don't think very many groups have that. Certainly not small onesie twosie stations. Bill, how about your group? What do you do in that case? Did I just catch you unaware? Or did we lose him? Mr. Harrier? He must have gotten on the phone or done something. Anyone have a comment here? Now, Jeff, you were telling me that you had a little bit to go funky in your neighborhood, but by and large in southern Florida, you didn't get the disaster that the other areas did.
No, we didn't get near what they did. That's why I said earlier, those that are just joining us. Um, yeah, it I thought this week was going to be actually on what happened here in on the west coast of Florida, but it really doesn't it doesn't hold a candle to what's going on. You know, I'm trying to bring up a picture right now that I had that I took off of Fox Weather that Asheville was 2,100 feet above sea level. And you look at the flooding that they've had, and you think to yourself, well, it's not going to flood here. And, then you see it. But yeah, trying to bring up some of these pictures that we have, that I took, give you a perspective of what we had. But as I say, it pales in comparison to what went on in some of those in the upper 47, as I call it.
All right, there you go.
This is the hospital next to WEMB. that I was talking about.
Not much of a hospital left there.
Hmm.
No, it's they're still there, but they had to rescue people off the roof. It was not a good thing.
No.
Hmm. Did Fort Myers get hit?
Not. I haven't really heard much about Fort Myers.
Hmm.
I know it hit close to Perry, and I've been to Perry. A lot of the homes on the Gulf Coast were on stilts, but many more weren't. And again, it looked like somebody just wiped that whole town off the map. Several of them in that area, actually, because that's where Helene hit with the biggest winds. And but it was the 300-mile radius of the rain that caught others off guard. So, what plan do you have if you suddenly lost power or the internet? What would you do to keep going? Anybody have a plan in place that they'd like to share? Well, we got to.
That's when last Thursday when we had this Zoom, my wife and I and one of the cats already went over to her sister's, which essentially is right around the corner across the street. So, and that's pretty much our plan on that. And then as soon as it's over, then I go ahead and come back home and assessing whatever damage it has. But that's really, she's up, her sister is up on the third floor. So, we didn't, that's usually where we go. And then we just kind of camp out and however.
Mr. Voris, didn't you just come through a flood up there in your neck of the woods?
Trying to get it to unmute. Here a while back, we had some flooding up here. As far as my stations, I've got a spare transmitter in here and even an antenna that I can tune for at least some of the frequencies. But um, most of our sites are pretty high up, so I don't worry about flooding. Um, Even though we're not supposed to get hurricanes in Nebraska, we have had storms roll through here with hurricane strength winds. The last wind event that we had winds um, clocked up over 90 mile an hour. So we do get our share of wind here. But as far as an actual plan for the radio stations, the studio here, we do have some backup sites that we can bring online if we have to, but that's kind of still a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but
But a lot of stations are self-contained. I mean, why not? But suppose you needed another site to broadcast out of. The question is, could you make arrangements with another station? Was that you, Jeff?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to show that picture real quick. That's all. This was the Asheville picture.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I noticed in the news today that there's some sites that are over 5,000 feet in western North Carolina. I did not know that. I thought Denver was the mile high city.
Marketing is everything.
Hmm.
But yeah, the power at Boone, which is up in the mountains, Ellen told me that they had had a lot of water, a lot of landslides, and again, the staff was very active in preserving the station without losing much in the way of equipment.
We we just have the usual standard stuff. Multiple ways to get audio to the site. The site has historically never flooded. We hope that that continues to be the case because the site is in the middle of a field and the floor is about a foot above the field. So we hope history continues to repeat. The overall elevation at our site is 50 feet, and the highest the water has ever gotten is 35, using that same reference. So far we have a 15-foot margin, give or take.
Pretty close. But you do get a lot of storms down your way.
Yeah, we also got to practice a little bit because in 2020 the tower we were on fell, so we scrambled, and the engineer at the time borrowed a transmitter and an antenna from another station that was available at their studio. Took a computer over there and put our stream on the air, and that got us back on the air. It took a while longer to actually get something really back on the air. We had to move sites and negotiate a new lease, and that was not an instant process by any stretch. Uh, Studios have two generators, and the building is 12 feet above anything that's ever happened flood wise. So, we hope that that's the case, but that's you know you live on the coast, life can get interesting.
Well, that tells us that your studio is not on the coast, and therefore you're a little safer.
And potentially we could operate over the internet, get audio to the site from anywhere with a little bit of notice.
Yeah,
but I don't have it set up to automatically switch, and that's probably a good project. If I can't get to the site, I can't make the switch.
if you're on the 8th floor or 10th floor or something like that, you're not ever going to have that problem. You're going to lose power unless you have a generator. But
Yeah.
you're not going to have the flood.
Well, power seems to be the main issue here. We had power go out this week. 80 degrees, sunny, no problem. The power goes out. I mean, it just the power grid is in my opinion not stable. I have 2 or 3 outages a month.
Mm-hmm.
I never have to exercise my generator intentionally. It gets to run several times a month, all the time.
Barry, I could tell you about the backup plan that KQED FM has, which is really rather extensive. And KQED FM is a National Public Radio member station. And there's also a television station associated with KQED, KQED TV. KQED TV is up at Mount Sutro in San Francisco. And KQED FM's main transmitter is on Mount San Bruno. But I think it was back in the year 2020, we installed the backup FM transmitter at Mount Sutro. The television station had a lot of space, and Mount Sutro wanted a combined antenna that they could try to interest several other FM stations to use as a backup. So that got installed. And in the years since then, KQED FM has turned the Sutro site into a full backup site, complete with a satellite downlink to receive the NPR programming. There goes my ship's clock. And also a studio booth, soundproof studio booth, and a full mixing console, which is Lavo, which came from a temporary studio that we were in. So we have the ability to move the entire operation of the FM up to Mount Sutro if for any reason the studio becomes unavailable. The other thing that we have up there to complete the picture is a complete redundant Dowlet automation system. So it mirrors the studio system. So if, again, we're thrown out of the studio for any reason, and at one point there was a gas leak in front of the building, and we were just about to be kicked out because of that when local utility got the gas leak capped off. But you never know in earthquake country what's going to happen. And Sutro is a very, very solid, basically made of concrete building, the whole facility. So our automation system backs up the studio, and we could walk out of the studio, and all of the programs that have been produced during the week could be played back out of our backup automation facility. We have full access to the National Public Radio satellite system up there. And the final piece of the puzzle is we have full connectivity out to the Sacramento transmitter site, as well as the Mount San Bruno transmitter site. So we think we're in pretty good shape.
Sounds like it. Now, I know WCBS, now sports, was news. They had a way of every day loading the program for the day onto a laptop, which if the building had to be evacuated, they could just pick up and go wherever they had to go. And Mike, was it KRLA or KDIZ 1110 when I visited you out there that you had a backup running at the transmitter site for the programming?
Well, there was a small studio there. Chris can talk more about it because he probably was involved with it back in the KRLA days. But yeah, that site had a backup studio, but nothing to the extent of what Larry's talking about. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, actually, the mixing console is out in one large room, which is where the operator would be. The studio booth is for the news department because KQED has, I think, just about the best news operation in San Francisco. And they plan to be able to have their news people in a nice soundproof booth. The actual control room that it's in, it's a little air conditioning noise, but it certainly is usable. There's the ability to take phone calls up there. There's a very basic hybrid system. So it's hopefully it never needs to be used, but it is there. And the station feels pretty good about it. We put a lot of effort into building all of those things.
A lot of emphasis probably came from that 88 earthquake that really affected San Francisco and the environs, I would
That's
think.
the 89 earthquake, actually.
89, okay.
I remember it well.
I remember it only in the sense that the day after it happened was when I was going on vacation and flying out of the country.
So do you guys, Larry, do you guys have other redundancies as far as connectivity outside? I'm assuming there's probably fiber in at the site, but an earthquake can mess up a fiber just like anything else, I suppose, being it's in the ground. So do you guys have like microwave links or anything like that that allow you to connect elsewhere?
Well, there is 18 gig from the studio to Sutro and also to San Bruno. There's also, I believe, redundant fiber links for internet connectivity, certainly at the studio, but I believe at Sutro Tower as well. And then there is also the ability to send multiple gigs of bandwidth between the studio and the transmitter, or from the transmitter to back to the studio, because the main phone system for KQED is actually located up at Sutro Tower. So there is a large amount of network bandwidth between, certainly between Sutro and the studio in the Mission District in San Francisco, and plenty of bandwidth to San Bruno as well.
Well, it does sound like you've got a multi-point plan there. Yet we have a lot of stations. We talk about the Southeast here right now. When the internet goes out, that's it. They don't have any
Or,
incoming, and
or
they don't,
cellular?
and they don't have any. They don't. Well, the internet is down, and the cellular doesn't do you any good. That's how they're all connected, isn't it?
Well, I will say for the Sacramento station, there is an MPLS line that connects the transmitter. But as a redundant backup, there is a cellular backup into a Comrex. So the Comrex normally will, which is the backup link in itself. WorldCast is basically our main audio transport system. But there's a Comrex that full time receives audio from KQED, but not from the studio. It receives it from Mount San Bruno.
Yeah.
And
But see,
it also receives it via as a backup because you can have two feeds into the Comrex. There's one which is connected to a wireless hotspot at all times as a backup.
here's the problem, and that is, Mark, that if the internet goes down and power goes down, the cell is coming down shortly thereafter.
Not totally. We
Well,
have we have cell networks here in Nebraska that are strictly microwave,
but
and
they have to have power.
they do. They have a generator at each site.
Well, that's pretty good for Nebraska. Not every place
Yes.
has that.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, and again, you think about this, a studio for a small station that's taking network programming off the satellite, and they're using their uh, IP connected link to the transmitter. You could have a great deal of problem getting programming back on the air if you don't have a plan. Now, some of the transmitters have little slots in the back where you can put a SD card and you can switch over to that, but that doesn't allow the distribution of news and information, where the food is, where the roads are blocked, etc. So overall, unless someone else wants to share some plans and thoughts here, the point is plan ahead. You may not ever expect a flood to hit your transmitter site or your studio site, but as you can see here in Asheville, it can happen.
Barry, I was looking at yesterday's DIRS report, which is very incomplete, as we know, and they're basically saying it's not too bad if you read that report in terms of number of stations off air. So I think we're going to find out later that stations just couldn't complete a report,
Or didn't want to.
or didn't want to. Yeah. The other thing I was going to say though is one other thing we do about KLUX is on a combined antenna. And one thing I've pushed for, and we're finally going to do this fall, is install a backup antenna at the studio, which I grant you is nothing like being at 850 feet, but it'll get us on the air if something happens. And I have a relatively portable 3 kilowatt transmitter to hook up to it.
Well, that's a good point. And I actually had a conversation with the guys at Aqua Broadcast, which is the second transmitter company in England,
Yeah.
because nobody else is building them right now. And the point that we both agreed on, we talked about it, and that is that technology has made it possible for you to put a 500 watt or 1,000 watt transmitter in the back of your truck and carry it anywhere.
Oh yeah, this thing weighs 50 pounds, 6 rack units. It's 3.5 kilowatts.
And the difference in 3.5 kilowatts to 6 kilowatts or even
Nothing.
50 is not very much at all. You're going to have a little building penetration difference, but in a car, no one's going to know the difference.
Well, we're actually gonna do some tests once we get the antenna up on the tower and see how good or bad it is, just so we know.
Well,
But
I'll just tell this anecdote and we'll move on. Some years ago, guy ran into a power vault and took down a 5 kilowatt RCA. No, it was a 10. It's a 10C. And so the station was basically off the air because the only other thing in the building was an old Gates FM, I think it was a 5B or something like that. And after some hours of work, I got the exciter on the air. about 250 watts.
Yeah.
Now we're talking a 10 kilowatt down to 250 kilowatts. Well, the group chief engineer who'd been in Phoenix at the time drove halfway down to Tucson, heard the station, figured we were back up and everything was just fine, went back home.
Well, years ago, after a FM20 went to a different world and could not be recovered, I put a 50-watt exciter on a 10-bay panel antenna for a couple of weeks.
Sure.
50 watts isn't great, but as soon as we came up, we got a barrage of phone calls. Glad to hear you're back. I mean, people calling in from all over.
Well, if you think about it, and it's very common, the translators, let's say 10 watts on the top of Sandia Crest in Albuquerque, you're going 80 miles and hear it. So there you go.
Works great for vehicles, and that's your main audience these days.
Absolutely.
Well, and of course, the higher the antenna, the better it is. I mean, I put a 500 watt on out here where my antenna is 1,270 feet up. And people out in the middle of the state can hear that just as well as they can hear the 20 kilowatt that I normally feed it.
Yeah, well,
just a little noisier on the fringe, that's all.
My terrain down here is described as pancake. From 20 miles inland to the coast, there's no hills. The only hills are overpasses.
Right. Sure.
So if you get an antenna up a couple hundred feet, that's really wonderful.
I have a similar story. About 20 years ago, some kind of a power surge took out a 10 kW Collins transmitter for KBOO FM in Portland. And I was new on the scene. I'd only worked there a few weeks. I went up and put the backup transmitter on the air. That backup transmitter came up and ran for about 2 minutes and then belched huge smoke out of the PA cavity. So now the main and the backup transmitters are both dead. I ended up, I grabbed one of the exciters out of those Collins transmitters and put cable on the air with a 10 watt Collins power from a 10 watts power from the Collins exciter when it's normally a 10,000 watt station. People thought that I had the transmitter back on the air, right, running just off a 10 watt exciter. Everybody thought I had the transmitter back on the air. Later that day, I found a 100 watt amp, and I put a 100 watt amp on that 10 watt exciter. So putting a 100 watt amp, I was running the station at 1% power, and we ran like that for 3 or 4 days until the parts came in and I was able to repair the main transmitter to get it back on the air. But another engineer commented that 30 miles away, he was still picking up the KBOO signal with a strong enough signal that he had full stereo lock.
Yep.
Well, I think the statute of limitations is long gone. But when I was in school, we had a carrier current station, which different nodes kept dropping off and failing. I was not the engineer, but the engineer got very frustrated, took a CW set, converted it to AM, put it on top of the tallest dorm, and hit the city with 10 watts, and everybody was pretty happy. Although I think the FCC would not have been happy, but that's long gone. As long as we're talking
limitations.
Yep, exactly. Now, as long as we're talking about transmitters and alarms there, let's talk about the HD sideband situation. The commission just allowed stations, unless you're in the 107 part of the band, to adjust sidebands asymmetrically. Is there anyone here doing that? And if so, would you talk to us about it? And if not, would you like to know more about it?
How does that help?
Hello there.
Okay.
How would that help?
Theoretically, it would allow less interference from sideband to sideband.
Barry, I can tell you about the KQED Sacramento station, KQEI, which is on 89.3, and there is a very close neighbor on 89.5. So when KQED FM, KQEI FM in Sacramento upgraded to HD, we immediately caused interference to the 89.5 KVMR, I believe, in Grass Valley. And so the managers talked to each other, and we came to the conclusion that we would apply for experimental authorization to reduce the level of the HD on the upper sideband to -20, but get our authorized -10 HD on the lower sideband. The Nautel transmitter did that without any problem whatsoever. And I can tell you that it has worked great.
Reduce the interference.
Is that an
Absolutely.
adjustment? Is that an adjustment through the exciter?
That is an adjustment through the AUI, and as far as your HD setup is concerned, the software specifically allows you to set the level of the upper and lower sideband.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry if I'm asking goofy questions, but I'm starting to learn about HD because we're thinking about putting a station to HD, and I had been reading about this as asymmetrical sideband levels and such, and so I was just curious.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. The original HD transmitter we have at that site is a Harris HD transmitter, and its software did not allow for the changing of the sidebands. But at that point, the station was also much lower power. When channel 6 went away, KQEI was able to change its directional antenna to cover a much wider area and also go to circular polarization. And that is when the HD, also the change went from -20 HD to you were allowed higher HD power levels. So the backup at KQEI HD was kept at a -20 level until the HD equipment for the old Harris transmitter finally died, and we didn't think it was worth replacing because the Nautel has been so 100% reliable.
When you when you went up, I'm sorry, to -10, what did that do to your coverage?
Well, it's a low power station, so it actually made a really good difference for the HD coverage throughout the Sacramento area. And when we experimented again with dropping to -20 on one side and -10 on the other, it didn't make that much of a difference because, of course, the receivers look at both sidebands. And the fact that you have dual HD sidebands really only helps you out, as far as I know, in multipath situations where you might get a null on one sideband, but the other sideband is not nulling.
Well, as Grady showed us a few weeks ago, there are some processors that will allow you to adjust sidebands. I don't know if you can do digitally as well as analog, but one would think that that would be possible to run just one sideband.
Well, Barry, one of the situations I'm looking into for that is I have a second adjacent that's very close to my contour coverage, and there might be some benefit of reducing that sideband, one of the sidebands on the higher, 89, whatever higher frequency compared to the one that goes lower, because there's nothing for about 5 channels below my signal. That's just one of the options that we might have, and the initial studies say that it would help mitigate any potential interference, especially if we bring the power up over the overall HD power up, which I'd like to do also. Because right now I have a mighty 460 watts of HD power.
Well, one station out here puts about 300 watts over their city of license, which is 20 miles from their transmitter.
Yeah.
They asked me about HD, and I said, well, that would give you 3 watts at that distance. And yeah, you need a little more power in many cases. There's no question.
Well, in the flattest pancake terrain here, we get about 40 miles on the HD, which is pretty amazing. Us to a vehicle.
Yep.
And about 20 miles to inside buildings. That's not terrible for 460 watts.
Reminds me a bit of the old con system where Leonard managed to take an AM station and reduce one sideband in favor of the or move it slightly.
Yeah.
So Barry, let me share something about HD versus analog coverage. We're members of the DTS AutoStage project that Xperi is doing. And so we have access to all of the mapping that they do. And this is for people who don't understand or know this. This is the new cars that include reporting back to AutoStage, DTS AutoStage, which is an Xperi product, their coverage and their listening habits. So it's not Nielsen at all. It's what the car is listening to. It's really cool. We have 2 stations that run -10, one in San Francisco, one in Tampa. And we can see, this is not our data, this is Xperi's data, that we have better listenership on the HD because they can actually separate it on the HD than we do on the analog. So every little bit of HD power is important. And I think it was Mark, you asked, why do we need this? Well, because the more the merrier. I mean, I hate to be a glutton, but the more the merrier. And our -10 stations have certainly shown, and I don't think I can share that data. I don't think that's something I can do legally. And I don't want to get in trouble. So, but we have some really cool maps from DTS, and they prove that the listeners that are part of that setup, where it's certain car manufacturers have this modem in their car, and it all reports back. Kia's, Hyundai's, Mercedes, couple others report back what's going on. So it's good data. It's not complete, but what we're seeing is very interesting that the HD coverage, and they present the map as a heat map. So if you know about heat maps, it's more like, where is this all going on over a geographical area? And we were amazed. It's not in every market that we're seeing this, but with the -10s, and what I'm talking about is the HD injection power level in Tampa and in San Francisco, San Bruno, is pretty impressive.
So first put out, you had a fair equivalence, and the big difference was that, of course, as you drove around, if one of them would duck, you'd be thrown off to analog or thrown off the digital. And everybody remembers, well, most of us remember the days when the 2 signals, the analog and the digital, were not in sync. And we had some products brought out by the processor guys to do these things, to delay one or to watch it and adjust the delay. But now as you move up more power from the -20 to the 14 to 10, now you're doing something that is going to overreach the analog all by itself, insofar as tests have shown, and should be stable, should prevent any of that jumping back and forth.
Barry, I have a little anecdotal, non-scientific, but when KJAZ bumped up their HD power, subjectively, I could tell, especially north of the Hollywood Hills and downtown, much better on the HD than the analog. And that's just anecdotally.
I have heard over the years that digital transmission in some ways is more forgiving than you would think. Error correction, yes. Redundancy, yes. One guy wanted to sell me a system for an STL that would reach from Phoenix all the way down here to Tucson, 120 miles, digitally, where there was no line of sight or anything like that.
Across the desert?
Yep. Yep.
Snake oil.
He claimed it would work because the data and the bits and bouncing off the hills and whatnot. And more questions I asked, the less I heard back from him. But in the middle range, what we're just talking about, Mike, is that with more digital power, you can put a stable signal out a lot farther than stations used to do so.
The deal is you've got digital data that's being recreated back into the audio and video. And so if it's missing a bit, they've got all kinds of algorithms in there that can figure out where that bit's missing. But you don't get all the reflections and the background noise that you do with regular analog. So it either works in digital, or you get bits missing, or it doesn't work instead of a noisy signal.
Yeah.
Well, you do get all of the reflections and all of the noise that you get in analog on digital. It's just that digital has the ability to filter that out and ignore it. But I mean, once you have an envelope, it's analog, you know.
But it's been recreated by putting back together the digital bits. And so you're not actually listening to the received signal. You're listening of the content in the received signal that was recreated.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask the Brain Trust their thoughts on this topic. And Brian up at BSW will know exactly what I'm talking about, I believe. But imagine trying to I'm working with a group in Hawaii, and they were using a 10-watt composite STL to jump across the water from the northwest corner of Oahu, which is the island Honolulu is on, to Kauai. That's about 80 or so miles over water. And that composite STL was sometimes dropping out. Sometimes that composite STL would drop out for a day or two at a time even. So I'm going to try using some Harris CD Link gear to run a 950 band digital STL rather than the 950 band composite STL. And I'm going to try putting a bit of RF power, an RF amp, to run a little bit more than the 2 watts or 5 watts that CD Link wants to do. And they've got 950 band grid dishes on it. And they're set up for horizontal.
The truth is the digital CD Link is capable of putting out 30 watts. It's in the programming. And I accidentally found that out one time when I pushed a certain set of buttons on the front, and it totally erased everything, and the thing couldn't figure out what frequency it was on. So I got that fixed, and then it was putting out 32 watts. And I called Harris, and they walked me back through that thing to get it back down to what it's supposed to be. It's all in the programming.
Wow. Well, who are you? I can't see my phone. Who are you? I may ask how to do that.
I had to call Harris, and this was 16 years ago, and I don't know if there's anybody there that would know anything about it now.
Do you remember how you got it into that mode where that CD Link would run 30 watts?
There was a bunch of things on that thing where you had to hold down the left arrow and the right this and the push the period and all that kind of stuff. And I just accidentally did it.
So you don't remember how you got there?
I don't remember. And to get it back right, I had to call Harris.
I planned on using an external RF amp to get that power up. But I'm going to try the CD link over that 80 or so miles of water and an RF amp, and I'm hoping that'll do it. If the composite STL could usually do it, but had occasional dropouts running 10 watts, then I'm hoping a healthy increase in RF energy power plus digital. I'm hoping that'll make it a reliable signal. I don't know. Does anybody else have any other ideas?
Diversity.
As I recall, the actual output of the CD link is something like 2 watts.
I think you're right. Now, somebody else just commented diversity. Another idea I've had is a different receive site that could pick up the same signal and relay it over to the FM transmitter site. So in other words, if one receiver loses a signal, maybe the other receiver will still have it.
102.5 here in Tampa, it does that. Their studio transmitter link is about 40 miles away. What they did is that it's 1,700-foot tower, so they put 2 receive dishes at different heights, and that seemed to accomplish it.
Isn't that largely to prevent ducting?
Exactly, that's what it was. So he may be dealing with something similar to it.
Over water?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. There's
And that works better than in analog, because in analog, that second antenna would possibly be adding noise to it, where in digital, that doesn't matter.
There's a
that
TV
water
station.
could be adding noise to it, but in digital it wouldn't matter. Hopefully you're right. Hopefully. Unfortunately, I can't put another receive dish on the tower. It's not even a tower. It's a phone pole mounted on top of a hill that is already maxed out. In fact, somebody did. They replaced a 2-bay antenna with a 3-bay antenna, but there wasn't enough face of the pole sticking up for the lowest bay. So what they did to make room for the third bay, the lowest bay, they dug away about 2 or 3 feet of the dirt around the pole to make space for the third
Oh my
bay.
God.
That's how desperate the RF the vertical real estate is on this pole. They dug away the ground to make space for the third element.
But you're describing poor engineering. I hate to say it, but
VHF doesn't have ground wave. You shouldn't try to put it in the ground.
Well, this is a mountaintop transmitter site on the island of Kauai, and like I said, they dug away about 2 or 3 feet of the earth to make space for the lowest bay of that FM antenna, and that's not the transmitter I'm responsible for. It's a co-located transmitter.
I saw Harold pop up there. He had something to add, and he got kind of collided.
Yeah, the thing on space diversity and dealing with diffraction is what it really is. KSBY TV in San Luis Obispo back in the 1970s picked up their signal, most of their program from KSBW in Salinas over a multi-hop microwave link. And they had 2 dishes on their tower, and when the microwave receiver would go into a fade, they would just start toggling back and forth until the fade went away. So that was their diversity reception.
Starlink.
Yeah. May I go back to the HD carrier thing, Barry?
Sure, by all means.
So, I was just thinking back in my mind, and I lean toward the technical of this kind of stuff. And so I just verified some of my thinking. But the HD radio system is OFDM. Okay. And the Google page I Googled said this modern communications technique provides both excellent bandwidth efficiency and high tolerance to the multipath fading environment common in urban settings. So then the next page I brought up was, okay, why? And then it says one key principle of OFDM is that low symbol rate modulation schemes, blah, 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 suffer less from intersymbol interference caused by multipath propagation. It is advantageous to transmit a number of low rate streams in parallel. A lot of technical stuff in there, but this just reiterates that the HD system is pretty robust compared to our analog system. And that goes back to what we've discovered on this, DTS AutoStage heat map. So
I look at OFDM as just a whole bunch of QAM carriers, each carrying a separate stream of data. And you lose some, the others are still there, and there's enough redundancy and forward error correction that it can recover. What's amazing is it's all done in DSP. How they do that is beyond me.
The other thing about the HD is OFDM is it's COFDM.
Oh my God.
Now I'm making lunch. Anyway, the COFDM is coded. So the audio packets are broken up and they're not sent in a linear order. So if you get a dropout going under a bridge or something like that, it can theoretically, if the dropout is short enough, it can rearrange the packets that it misses and put them all together as recovered audio.
Yeah, that's just time interleaving, which is fairly common practice. Does lead to latency, but we may not care here.
I just posted a picture of that lowest bay where they dug out the ground. Can you guys see it?
Yeah,
that is horrible.
Yeah,
that's what. Yeah, that's Kahili, and vertical real estate on that pole is so limited and precious and desperate. Like I said, they dug out the ground for that lowest bay.
Well, then you got no place to put a dish on that pole anyway.
That's what.
Well, there's already a receive dish existing. So what I'm suggesting is at a different site, I'll have a receive dish.
Well, but remember your beam width is so much that you could be separated horizontally, but this gets back into the space diversity theories and things like that. I think you want a vertical separation, even if you're at a different site horizontally. That's a complex one.
It is going to be. It'll be separated both horizontally and vertically. It's about 5 or 10 miles away, and it's a lower level site. So, and it's like the only option I have.
Yeah, your beam width may not be good enough.
We've checked it, and the transmitting STL location can talk to both.
Yeah,
so
80 miles?
we know. Yeah, it'll work. We've checked it. It'll work barely, but it works.
How many watts is this station? Do you know?
You mean the FM?
Yeah, the FM
FM
there
station?
that we're looking at. Yeah.
It's the TPO is 1250.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
What does your Viswar look like?
I'm just going to ask.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Back up. I did not give you the. No, the station that I'm dealing with is 1250 watts, but that antenna that's in the picture, that's for a different station that's co-located. So it's not the station I have to deal with. I don't know what their reflected power is like.
That's
well, it
like
can't be good.
Overkill beam tilt.
I know you've already asked yourself this question, but why can't you plant another pole?
Just not an option. It's a very difficult site to get at. It's helicopter access only.
Wow.
And then whatever equipment you take up there, you have to grunt it up a steep hill by man, and it's like, I'm trying to do it. I'd obviously I'd have to get help, but if I did, but trying to plant another pole is just not a realistic option. It's just not an option. In fact,
yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Well,
difficult site to deal with.
So
like
you're
we've
not
asked
going to be
before.
ordering that GV40 from me for this site, are you?
No, well, Brian, if you can carry it up the hill, I'll buy it.
Really? I would be
Yeah.
interested to know the visuar on that antenna, because that's too close to the ground.
It's practically on the ground. Oh my gosh.
I wonder if they did a calculation of the what's that, the RF energy on ground or something. I wonder if anybody did a calculation of that.
I seriously doubt anybody did any calculation whatsoever.
Oh my gosh.
And when you think you've seen it all.
Really? Yeah.
Does it glow at night?
Well,
Right.
I've got another picture I've got another picture I'm going to share you guys just to give you an idea of how much what the trouble is even to get up to this site. So, after you've gotten the helicopter ride up there and the helicopter has dropped you off, then you have to carry everything you've got up that hill, which are stair steps dug out of the ground and so steep and so difficult that there's a pull rope to pull yourself up the hill.
I see it.
In fact, I carried a Nautel VS1 transmitter up there, and it was so difficult that unfortunately, that transmitter was boxed. I had to just carry just put the box in the side and roll it up the hill like a square wheel.
Well, I can understand, due to the height, the elevation and everything, but man, if a guy can barely get up there, it's almost not worth messing with.
I got to get back to work, guys. Things starting to happen. Have a good day.
Thanks, John. Well, that's not something you see every day, Barry.
No.
Wow.
I think it was John Muscle?
McKay.
No.
Mike Tosh, a question.
I've gotten pictures of that site and the narrow path that you walk that drops off 1,000 feet on each side, and the path is only about 3 feet wide. It's I may have some pictures somewhere, but it's been years since I've seen them, and it's frightening to look at.
Hey, Mike Tosh.
Yes, sir.
If you get a chance, would you see if you can release any of that data? That's pretty interesting.
Well, it's graphical. I mean,
okay.
I don't think I can.
Okay. Well, I wish yeah. It's just interesting. We're looking at going to the -10 and out full steam ahead as soon as we can do it. So,
well, you might contact the company there. I was going to say Ubiquity, but it's not Ubiquity.
Xperi. Yeah. DTS Auto Stage.
At least that's the name this week. Next week it could be something.
Well, it's been like that for a couple of years. So yeah, and you can become a subscriber by some means. I'm not sure how much it costs.
Yeah.
Mike, you talked about QED and QEI. When one of them is at 88.5, the other one's at 88.3. Is there anything at 88.7?
There was a different gentleman speaking about KQED, and I don't think he's
Larry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was me. 88.7. I don't recall hearing anything on 88.7 when I tune around.
Because we have HD, but we have on both sides of both adjacents, we have HD signals. So
Right. The main carrier for KQEI was 89.3. So I didn't hear anything on 89.1. And with most of my radios, just a mile from our transmitter, I can tune in 89.5. So they have a lot of the signal coming from the Sierra foothills where they're located.
this is really something that's designed to minimize interference adjacently then, right?
Yeah, I think it's allowing you the option of increasing power as much as possible and causing the minimal amount of interference, especially since the KVMR is a really good radio station and really important for their community. And they have a lot of listeners in the Sacramento area as well. And you just hate to cause interference to another station that you think is pretty good.
As Barry pointed out earlier, it's quite similar to Con's power side, where you would suppress the sideband towards the adjacent channel.
That was my first thought. Yeah. The power side was also on one sideband, whether it was upper or lower, wherever the ascending, but it never really addressed the adjacents on both sides.
So, Barry, on the asymmetrical part of this discussion from the FCC, I know they're kind of sending the message that you have to go through a consultant to get the proper engineering. But what else do we know about that? Because I'm totally aware of the Nautel tool that will tell you, informally what you could do, and you can look at any station. But let's go a little further than that.
Well, as I read the public notice, it's there's an FCC web page or something that tells you what you could do.
Oh, okay. And they're going to let stations use that as their consulting material.
Well, I'm going to see if I can find it right now. Hang on.
Yeah.
Well, that was the original plan with allowing the -14 to -10 increase, was just to do it with a form, basically. But that hasn't been approved yet.
Well, that's where I'm headed here, because bringing in the consulting engineers for something like this is it's an easy couple of $1,000s for some stations, and it's like ridiculous. I'm sorry if anybody's a consultant, but it's a lot of money for just a calculation.
Yeah.
Hi. Hey, so who are you representing? ODOT, okay. So there's just a power blip up there. Apparently it knocked off an FM station, so I'm...
Oh, hey, John, you're not muted.
A what?
He is now.
I love eavesdropping.
Just thought I'd tell
them.
Well, what's the gentleman thing to do?
Well, this is 23 pages long. I will put the URL here in the chat so you can bring it up yourself.
So I know the two stations that we have running -10, we had to submit a request and get it approved.
You don't have to request it anymore. The asymmetric is just it's a month away because the OMB has to approve the form before you can do it. But then you just notify them that you've done it.
Yeah. City Island.
Yes.
And you got flooded?
Yeah, that if you look at the second rack from the end, um, that's the new to UPS. I actually put this in last night. It's at 11:30.
Huh.
If you go down, you'll see a line
Yeah.
of dirt. So that's how far down that it got in here. We were lucky actually that it only got into the transmitter room 1 foot of water, and the only reason it only got in only 1 foot is because out of you can't really see it, but past that yellow top bin, there's a 1 foot platform that contained the sump pump.
Hmm.
So there were 3 foot of water outside that was seeping in that came in to make that 1 foot. And as it did that, the sump pump was keeping it from going over that. But this UPS is brand new, along with the cable modem, and there's a mini computer that you can't see. But this is but the UPS was just like maybe one RU from the bottom. I decided that I'd
Yeah.
put it up much higher, and
Yeah.
I had to also move a lot of the other equipment to make for that as well. Mhm.
And what about the transmitters in the bottom?
Well, those are SX1. Well, yeah, they're both SX1 1As. So, but they're both backups. As far as what they look like now, it's hard to say because both of them are actually functional right now.
Hmm.
Um, that's a temporary situation. We'll find out where we go from here. Um, the AC controller board in this one here, in the one on the right, um, is uh, is cranky. Um, so we're not quite sure if the rest of them that's the same situation.
I would think
On the
after
Z1SX.
an experience like this that you'd want to build up everything and just start over with a platform of some sort, even higher than what you've got.
Not my decision.
Yeah.
If it
Hey,
was
Jeff,
if it was my decision, I'd have poked a hole in the floor since the foundation's not much to look at anyway, and then recessed the sump pump. That again, not my decision.
hey, Jeff, if that's an SX1 that you want to get back on there, have you talked to Michael Patton in
Oh yeah,
Louisiana? Yeah,
oh yeah,
he's a good guy with those.
yeah. These we're it well. This one here is an iHeart. I guess you can see my mouse from here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Yeah, this one here is the one for iHeart, and this is the one for us. This one actually does work. As I say, the AC controller board is this cranky. The yeah, in fact, we did the modification on the door as well for and yeah, it's so I mean this one here does well, it does work. Did I should say did work before the flood. But as I say, with the exception of the AC controller board, but yeah. When you look up on top here, well, you see the mod monitor, and then below the mod monitor is a Rolls FM receiver, and that one right there is what picks up the translator signal, and then we retransmit that as the primary. We also have the digital backup, and it's put in through the Diva. So if the Diva doesn't sense that, it'll go ahead over and switch over to the silent sensor will switch over to the web stream. But found that this is actually much more reliable than the web stream where we are. So this is a radio that I have for monitoring. I usually leave it on 1450, the iHeart, because they don't have anything to monitor. And then right below that, there's two little speakers that are taken off of the mod monitor for so I can hear what it is. So, and of course, there's the Burke, the tattletale as I call it.
Yep.
Yeah, and the Optobob at 9300. So We have to have these nicknames. So, yeah, the other one for iHeart is a BE. And that one, actually, the only reason actually, I was glad it happened anyway. I got a call that that this one was off the air last night about 8:30. So I went over. I had gotten the UPS delivered just earlier in the day, and I thought, well, okay, fine, I'll do it this morning before the. But when I was told that this one was off the air, I said, okay, fine, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I'll go over, find out why they're off the air, put them back on the air, and then install the UPS. And that way, in case I'm running late today, I wouldn't be late for the meeting. Hey, I got my priorities, you know.
Is that the 1 kilowatt BE?
Yes, it is. Yes.
You've got the output tuning option on that one, I see.
Yes. In fact, we've had to use it too, because what was happening is, and I don't know if I have the other, I don't know if it's if I have a good, yeah, I do. Okay. This is the let me share this. Let me okay. Yeah, I don't know how to go ahead to do the sharing to change the sharing. Okay. I guess I got to do it that way. Yeah, here's the here's the diplexer. This is the one for 1280. This is the one for 1450. This is how high the water got inside. Now understand this thing is outside in the in salt to begin with. So when Ben Umberger and I yesterday went over to the and cleaned it all out, um, it looks like it looks brand new again. It doesn't look in the same condition, but with the way it's been exposed, we probably should do this every once in a while anyway. Going back to that matching unit that you saw just above the BE, that we had to go ahead and change the reflect because there was way too much reflective to stay on. Last night, I think the reason why it went off is I think there may have been some, it may have not have been totally dry when we fired it back up. So it went off the air. But the 1280 didn't. But I think the reason why that was is there was more headroom because they're at a full 1 kilowatt and we're only running 300. So I think that's why we stayed on the air and they didn't. But I checked it various times today, and they were both on the air. So I think it's probably dried out by now. But you can see where the water came to the level. So and this we're not and this is actually pretty reflective too because of the fact that there was there's no waves inside of the cabinet. So that's an actual level. Water seeks its own level, and there it is. So, yeah. Yeah. Saturday morning at 10 o'clock was when I was finally able to get over to it. So I just thought you guys would like to see those.
Thank you.